Hey everybody, I'm David Fueling. I am a Director of Software Engineering in RippleX, and I am really excited to be here to talk to you about CFTs. So don't hold on too tightly to that name because it's probably going to get renamed, but for this presentation, CFTs is it. So yeah, let's jump right in. So CFT is a token. So we actually have a great tokenization mechanism in the XRPL right now called issued currencies. Sometimes we call them Trustlines. They work really great. I've been focusing in my day job on tokenization in the CBDC context and stablecoin context for the last 18 months, and we use Trustlines for our partners. So they work really well, but they're not perfect. So CFTs are kind of a response to what we've learned as we've gone to market with central banks and commercial banks in particular. So CFT, well, I'm going to start with T. It's a token. I actually looked online for a good definition of tokenization, and I couldn't find a satisfactory one, but I found this one in the Cambridge Dictionary, and I just really liked it. It reminded me of Chuck E. Cheese as a kid. I don't know if anyone went there, or an arcade. You give real money, you get these silly things called tokens, and they let you do stuff. And I just, when I read that definition, I just thought of a blockchain, like a plastic disk that is used in some machines. So, but some real examples here, CBDCs, of course, land, art, NFTs, we've heard a lot about NFTs. That's also a form of token. But, as you'll see here, the F in the middle of CFT is for fungible. So NFTs are non-fungible tokens. These are not NFTs. And basically, fungibility is essentially just, can you exchange two identical things without loss of value? So think a dollar bill in your pocket. If I took a dollar out of my pocket and I exchanged it with you, we still have a dollar. But if we both had a Honda Accord and I gave you my Honda Accord with 200,000 miles and your Honda Accord with not 200,000 miles, not fungible. So CFTs are fungible. But the last letter, the C, is they're compact. Really compact, actually. It turns out that Trustlines take up a lot of space in the ledger. And that's problematic. In fact, last year, we had some scaling issues with the XRPL. We solved them, we got beyond them, but we noticed that if we really want to support a world with lots and lots of token issuers and holders, we might need to do something a little different. And so you can see there's a really drastic difference in space on ledger. So let's come back to Trustlines. I want to just talk about some drawbacks to Trustlines. So the first thing, if you've ever used issued currencies or Trustlines, is they're reasonably complicated. They do a lot. They were actually invented for community credit or peer-to-peer credit. And so they have this cool but reasonably surprising balance tracking where you can net balances and one side can go positive, one side can go negative. There's this thing called rippling where if one issuer has $1, let's say, and a different issuer has $1, you can make payment paths through those same issuers, but you may not want to do that because I may not pay my dollar if I issue it. That can lead to a lot of unexpected consequences. Then there's the issues of trust. Trust lines come from, that name comes from this idea of, can you trust somebody to make good on their token? So if you give someone $100 in the real world, they give you the token, can you get it back? Next is, trust lines are limited. I'll kind of talk at the end about, I think it's XLS 27, which is a proposal to make trust lines work with escrows and payment channels, which I think is actually a good proposal, but there's some complications to it. And then last but not least, of course, they're kind of inefficient. So kind of set the stage, some assumptions that me and my co-author, Nick Bougalis, had when we proposed CFTs. One, we assume few issuances per issuer. So especially when you think about token issuers, a lot of these are regulated entities. So if you think a central bank, commercial bank, they're not issuing hundreds and hundreds of tokens. They're issuing a few or one. B is we actually want lots and lots of token holders. So we see this phenomenon with NFTs as well, right? We want lots and lots of people to hold NFTs, and it should be really easy to have really large collections of NFTs, same for CFT. And then last but not least, this idea of trust, we've deleted it from CFT. So if you think about when you go to your bank or your central bank and you want to buy a stable coin or a CBDC, you're kind of making a trust decision off ledger ahead of time. You wouldn't be giving money to that institution if you didn't actually trust them to kind of make you whole whenever you wanted to redeem. So we can kind of save space and actually reduce complexity by just sort of punting, I guess, on the question of trust. So some key features. I think these are complementary to Trustlines. Trustlines have been around for a very long time. They work well. And they do have a purpose. And even if CFTs did exist, I think Trustlines could still coexist. It's just we might want to steer people to issue tokens, certain types of tokens, in one or the other. They're more efficient, simpler, and again, no trust sets. So real quick, let's look at some of the on-ledger structures. You'll notice a lot of similarities if you read the NFT proposal spec. These are quite similar. This is heavily inspired from NFT, and the big innovation with NFTs was the on-ledger storage of NFTs, this new paging structure. But first is a CF token issuance. Again, if we rename the proposal, this might be some other name you'll see in a minute. But here on the left, I have a central bank. They've issued some USD, some euro. In the middle, a commercial bank with some USD. And maybe a game company on the right. That's another issuer. And then the key thing to note is that each issuer is limited to 32 tokens. But if you were an entity and you wanted to issue more than 32, well, just get a different address and you can keep issuing more. Some of the fields in the issuance are pretty obvious. There's a bunch of flags to control the characteristics of an issuance. So for example, if you imagine a store credit, you may not want a store credit to be redeemable or tradable on the DEX. You may only want that to be redeemable to the issuer. We, of course, have the issuer. A key difference between CFTs and Trustlines is the absence of floating point math. So floating point math causes some peculiarities in minor edge cases that make it difficult to fully support it in the XRPL. So we've gotten rid of that, and we're just using whole number integers, basically, to represent amounts. And then there's a bunch of things that we can do with CFTs. We can use them in escrows. We can use them in payment channels. We can use them everywhere that XRP is supported, roundabout. And then there's some metadata. So we suspected that people might want arbitrary data attached with an issuance. So maybe like a picture of your, picture of a dollar bill or something. Uncertain though. So that's basically just unstructured data at this point. Next is a CF token, which is just a holding of a particular issued token. And it's not terribly interesting, other than it's tracking locked amounts, so if you wanted to use these in escrows, for example. There's also a freeze capability in CFTs, which also exists with Trustlines. So long ago, we discovered that regulated entities need to freeze accounts sometimes. So that's an option here. It's decided by the issuer. And again, you as a token holder get to decide what issuers you want to trust. And then last but not least is a CF token page. This is extremely close to the NF token page, which you see in the NFT spec. Very similar construction with some minor differences to not collide with NFTs. So some open issues. Would love to have everybody read the spec, contribute. There's some discussion going on in GitHub. Essentially, I'll have a link at the end. But what first issue is what to call them. The very first comments, and there's about 10 comments on the on the proposal. It's all about naming. Some people think UFT for unidirectional or universal token. FT, so you can tell that the most important problem to be solved is naming. 2 is, should we build this? There actually, now that NFTs are about to go live, there are 3 types of essentially token on the XRP ledger, and this would introduce a 4th. So, maybe this would be better on a sidechain. Unknown, to be discussed. Some interesting ideas around CFTs. They look a lot like XRP. So like, could XRP actually become just another CFT with a special issuance maybe? That could simplify the code base perhaps. And then last but not least is XLS 27D, which is a great proposal to support escrow and payment channels. And essentially, floating point math is kind of the last remaining sticking point. So I actually think we should probably do both. So I think I have 20 seconds, so I probably don't have time to take questions here, but come talk to me afterwards if you want to. The discussion link is there on GitHub. I'm on Mattermost as well, and thanks for listening.